you ever watched the Family Feud or gone down a top 10 list? I love playing that with our teenagers because you never know what they're going to say, just like you never know what the people that are surveyed are going to say when they ask questions. But it's even better when you get the truthful ones, like we've done the research and this is what is going on in these things, like what are the top 10 reasons that someone calls in for being off of work, or what are the top 10 excuses for why the dishes didn't get put away. Things like that are really fun to listen to. And the truth is that there are other lists like this that aren't as fun to engage with. They don't have Steve Harvey telling you silly jokes in between. They are serious situations with serious consequences. Like, what would be the top 10 reasons that a marriage breaks apart? If you want to know the top 3, the first one is infidelity in the United States. The second one is bad communication. And the third one is finances. 1/3 of divorces in the United States cite financial disagreements, financial pressures, whatever you want to put around that, as the main issue for why they are no longer together. And in fact, the finances are often wrapped up in the other 2 issues in front of it, infidelity and bad communication. And so it's one of those things that it's a significant issue that sometimes we don't take the time to really talk about. We just assume that that's something that everyone understands, and we assume that's something that everyone's just going to work out on their own, but the data says that's not the case. There's lots of ways that you can get in trouble with finances in your relationships. You send someone to go to the store with a list of what they need to buy, and when they come back, the list is maybe half done, but look at everything else that's in the trunk that came home that they saw. Anyone live with someone like that? Or maybe when you go out and you argue over who's going to pay for what while you're out there. And this happens a lot. I saw a date once where they had very different ideas about this. I was sitting in a restaurant. It's kind of a little nicer one. I'm eating, and the couple over there, they seemed to be having a wonderful time until the bill came, because one of them thought that the other one was paying for everything, and the other one thought that they were splitting it. And I heard the one that thought the other one was paying for everything exclaim, "I would not have bought the lobster if I knew we were splitting." When you don't agree on what is worth purchasing, that becomes a problem too. For some of us, it's the problem that we purchase things we don't even necessarily want, but we can't seem to do without. Things that we have addictions to. And that can be drinking, it can be cigarettes, it can be books, it can be anything that Apple just put out. It's something where I need it, but the other person in the relationship looks at me as, that is something ridiculous, and you're wasting our money when you do that. Well, you get the idea. We have habits that put us in positions where paying for things that we need and the goals that we have as a family become next to impossible to accomplish. And it's always the other person's fault, right? Because they just don't understand where I'm coming from and what I'm trying to do. And if they understood that, then we wouldn't have a problem. But because they don't, we just can't seem to get through this together. And well, there's more than one right way to get out of those places. There are 2 things that are non-negotiable if you really want to save your relationships from a financial standpoint. If you don't want stuff to get in the way of who you are together, you're going to have to need at least 2 specific things. The first one is you're going to need to have the right attitude, the right approach when it comes to your finances. One of my favorite movies Pixar has ever done is Finding Nemo. I love the story of the dad going out to rescue his son and the growth along the way and all the characters they meet and the adventures of how far he's willing to go for his child. But in the midst of that, there's one scene where they're in the harbor and some of the birds are talking about what's been going on together, and all of the seagulls are lined up because one of them has a crab. And all you hear from them is mine, 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 mine. and they are just waiting because everything they see they think is theirs. I think that's how a lot of us view our possessions. We are seagulls when it comes to the stuff that we have. I know this is true for me a lot of the times because I like to get things cleared out and cluttered out of our house every once in a while. And might as well take it to Goodwill or give it away to friends we think might be able to use some of the stuff that we're not using anymore. But I've learned something about myself. I'm really good at getting rid of everybody else's in the house stuff. I'm not as good at getting rid of my own things. Things that I haven't used in years. Things that I've forgotten about, and suddenly they get pulled back out. I'm like, oh, we can't get rid of that. That's mine. Whether it's because I just want it because it's mine or because there's some sentimental stuff attached to it or whatever the case might be, I'm dreaming that maybe one day we'll actually need it. But whatever it is, I'm really good at getting rid of everybody else's stuff, and I'm terrible at getting rid of my own stuff because it's mine. Our families don't work very well when we view everything as just a collection of individuals. We are our own people, but we are also united together as families. We are in this together. I think there's wisdom that we overlook sometimes when we look at the fact that we were made one flesh when we have this bond of marriage. There should be something difficult to separate when you're married. And there needs to be a way to move in the same direction. I mean, have you ever tried to, you've done this sometimes with sporting competitions like wrestling stuff, sometimes we'll do some exercise, you'll tie like a rope or a belt around two people, and one will go one way and one will run the other way, and it's like the hardest thing in the world to do. You don't go anywhere until somebody falls and crashes. And sometimes, because we're so tied together, but we're not acting like it, we're running in opposite directions, and the only thing that's going to happen is eventually someone is going to fall and crash. And yeah, one person might get what they want, but more likely you're both going to end up on the dirt. So if we really want to move in the same direction financially, we have to approach each other when it comes to our stuff the same way we talked about approaching each other last week. Be humble. One's not over the other. We're in this together. Be gentle. The people that you're dealing with are incredibly valuable, and you cannot afford to pay to fix them. Be patient. In other words, love one another, even when it comes to how you set up the bills and the finances and the things that you buy. When you move together in this way, your families can thrive and your relationships can be solid because you believe when you see the other person and how they're spending things that you really are in this together. And it gives you the freedom to not only bless each other, but to bless others through your relationship and how you are handling things. Another big reason not to be seagulls, always claiming that everything is mine, is because there is a foundation for this attitude towards our finances. The foundation is the fact that everything we have, all of our stuff, all of our abilities, our life itself isn't really ours. It's God's. And this is something that you hear not just in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament. And some of you might be saying, wait a minute, I've worked really hard for what I've gotten. You don't know what I've gone through. You don't know the things that I've had to struggle with. And the answer is, you're right, I don't, but I do know this. Your abilities to fight through, are you taking what God has given you and using it well? Deuteronomy 8:17 and 18 puts it this way. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant which He swore to your ancestors, as it is today. I like how James puts it even better. In fact, if there was one verse that I would want you to carry away today, it would probably be this one. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. In other words, we have a God who loves to give good and perfect gifts. And how we approach that will be how well we receive what he offers. There's a friend of mine who pastors another church in the state, and when he was younger, he had a car with a license plate that said, "Not mine." And people would always ask him questions about it. They thought maybe it was because it was really his wife's in the relationship, and he was driving it, but it was not his, or maybe it was because the bank still owned the title to it, and he was paying them money, and so it wasn't his. But it wasn't any of that. He put that on there as a reminder every time he went out to his car to drive, that everything he has, even that vehicle, was not his. He had to loosen his grip, just like we do, on the stuff that we carry around, because we are stewards of what God has entrusted to us. To be a steward means that you look over things for somebody else. And so whatever their values are, whatever the mission of the owner is, that is what you work towards. If you were the steward of a company, say you got put in charge of one of the major corporations near you, we'll just go crazy and say you owned a Chick-fil-A. Well, really, you are the steward for the owner of the Chick-fil-A. And the Chick-fil-A wants to make excellent chicken sandwiches and chicken nuggets, and want to serve their community. And you come in, and instead of doing that, you decide, don't make things well, make things cheap. All the extra profits you want to use to better yourself. You're going on vacations to Cancun, you're driving the latest model, you've got all the designer clothes, and then the owner shows back up and he goes into the store and he sees that the food is not doing what it's supposed to. Nobody is saying my pleasure, and all of the money that should be going to other things has suddenly been going to you. How well do you think that would be received? I wonder if some of us are living our life that way, though. All of the things that God has entrusted to us, we are using it just in selfish ways without even thinking about it sometimes, instead of saying, how can I align what God has given me around the values and mission that he has for my life? You see, that leads us to the second necessity. Not only do you have to have the right attitude to approach your finances, you also have to have some sort of plan for your finances. They don't just magically fall into place. Some of us, we get paid on Friday and we get really excited because our bank account looks huge, but by Monday morning we wonder, where did it all go? You don't even remember what you did with it, but it's gone. If you don't know what your basic financial picture is, you are set up for failure. And when I say the basic financial picture, it's this. Do you know how much money is coming into your family? Do you know where it's going? Whether it's to debt or recurring bills or to things that you guys just like to spend on. If you don't know those things, you can't do anything about it. And so you need to have a plan that is manageable. So don't say, hey, we're going to make this plan and in the next month we're going to make $1 million, because for most of us that's not a manageable plan. And it has to be something that's agreed upon. One person can't just come in and say, this is what we're going to do, because that's not very humble or gentle or patient. But you want to say together, how can we take what we've been given and the income that comes in, and how can we align it around the values and mission that God has for us? How can we align it around the goals that we have as individuals and as a family together? Are there bills that we can eliminate or shrink in order to increase the impact that we can have? And you start to build a plan around those things. If you need a skeleton to start building that plan out on, a great place to start is to say, hey, 10% of everything that comes in, we're going to save or we're going to invest it. A good rule of thumb is that if you don't have like 3 months, maybe up to 6 months of expenses and kind of a savings emergency fund, that then you're going to be really hurting if something happens, a car accident, a hospital bill you weren't expecting. You won't be able to figure out how to make things meet. And so that's one way to make sure you're providing for your family and for all the other things that you want to do going forward, is to take some of it and save it. And then take 80% and use that around what fits your family. What bills do you have to pay? What activities do you need to be involved in? What goals do you have? All of these sorts of things. You can fit that 80% around that, which leaves you with last 10%. And my challenge for you would be that would be 10% that you give away. Specifically, give it back to the one who has given it to you. Not because he needs it. He's got all of the cattle on 1,000 hills. He's not looking for you to give him something because he's hungry. But in giving back to him, it keeps the attitude clear in your heart that this is not mine. It keeps my hands loose. It reminds me who I'm living for. It reminds me about how my life is connected to others and how it makes a difference. And believe it or not, God honors that so much that he's promised that if we're willing to do that, then it will lead to a blessed life for us too. In the book of Malachi, he's talking about this idea. And he says, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." Now, I don't know exactly how he plans on blessing all of that when it happens, but I know this. If our relationship with our stuff says we are in this together, if we have a plan that we can follow that builds trust in each other, if it's pointed in a way that we have goals that we are working towards as a family and as individuals, and if we keep giving to remind ourselves that it is not ours to begin with, then God will bless us. He'll bless our relationships. He will bless our families. He will make an example and bless the influence that we have in the community around us. And it will take so much of the pressure off that life will not be the same. Lord, I pray that if anyone is hearing these words today and they are struggling because things and finances and money have been getting in the way of the relationships they have with the people that are closest to them, Lord, I pray that they would hear these words and take you up on your offer. That they would test you in this. That they would test you in having an attitude that says, this is not mine. This has come as a gift from my Father. That we would test you by aligning what you've given us around who you've called us to be. And that we would test you in this by saying, this really isn't mine, by giving back to you a portion of what you've given to us. That we might be reminded again and again that we are blessed people. And we have received a blessing that we did not earn and we do not deserve. But that you who love us give it freely. Especially to those who honor our relationship with you. We pray these things in your name. Amen.